Hello, everybody. This is Caitlin, and I'm here with Christina. And
Hello.
in this video, we will be talking about how to dialogue on the issue of abortion towards pro-choice advocates.
Yes. Hello, everybody. My name is Christina. I'm currently an intern with the organization Justice for All. And what we do is we go into college campuses to speak with pro-choice advocates about abortion with the goal of having them change their heart and mind on abortion. We also go to churches or pro-life clubs and train people how to have these also productive conversations about abortion. So today I just want to share some tools and tips with you guys so anyone from anywhere around the world can continue this pro-life evangelization. I think I just want to start out sharing a story of a conversation I had with a student back in November before we get started, just to show the power that these kind of dialogue tools can really have in conversation. So the Justice for All team, we were at the University of Texas, San Marcos back in November, and a student who I'll call Kayla, she approached us and asked us, she asked me whether I was pro-life or pro-choice, and I told her I was pro-life. And I wanted to really know more about her view. We get all sorts of people come up to us, whether they're pro-life or pro-choice. So I asked her what she thought about abortion. She said she was pro-choice. And so I started out by asking her if she thought abortion should be legal through all 9 months of pregnancy or only up until a certain point. And Kayla told me that she only thought it should be legal in the first trimester. And right there, I was able to actually find some common ground with her in a way by saying, I agree with you that abortion should be illegal in the second and third trimester too. And the purpose of me finding that particular common ground was in order to shift the dynamic from no longer some, fist fight war, but to help Kayla see that I wanted to walk with her in order to seek truth. And I wasn't trying to be against her, but we're on the same team seeking truth. And so I started asking her more questions about if she thought sex selective abortion should be legal, or if abortion should be used as a form of birth control. And we both agreed that those were wrong and should not be legal. And so after I was finding more out about her view, I then opened up our brochure that we have here. It's called An Invitation to Dialogue About Unintended Pregnancy and Abortion. And on one of the pages here, we have pictures of human development. And I asked her, when do you think that the unborn become biologically human? And Kayla, if I recall correctly, pointed, I believe, at this 12-week picture. And I was able to then share with her the biology about humans when we actually become biologically human. And we were able to find common ground and agreement that life does indeed begin at fertilization. But then as I was talking to Kayla, the next question then is, okay, sure, we're biological human organisms, but when do we become humans with value? Or when should we have, are we entitled the basic right to life or basic rights in general? And that's a really big question to answer. And so I started asking Kayla, can we agree that it would be morally the same kind of wrong for anyone on this campus to kill you or me, like that we should have the same basic rights, we're equally valuable? And Kayla said, yeah, of course, we're equally valuable. And then I said, I think that's kind of strange though to think of that, because if we look at each other, we're really different. For example, I'm really tall. Most people are shorter than me. We have different skin colors, hair colors, eye colors, probably from different socioeconomic statuses maybe. You're probably smarter than me. The list can go on our differences. But in order to demand that we should be treated equally, it seems like there should be something that is the same or equal about us. And then I pitched the question to Kayla, what do you think is the same about us that demands we should have basic rights such as the right to life? And Kayla quickly said, we're human. I said, yeah, I think that's it too. I think that makes sense of why racism is wrong, why sexism is wrong, because we're focusing on differences in those circumstances when we're being racist or sexist or ageist, ableist, anything else, rather than focusing on what we have in common, which is our humanity. At this point, I then asked Kayla, can we agree then that if the unborn or if it's our humanity that demands we be treated equally, and if the unborn are human, then do you think it makes sense then that we should extend those same rights to the unborn? And Kayla responded by saying, I've never had anyone explain it to me that way before. And I get it. I understand what you're saying. And I think I actually agree with you. But I just don't know if abortion should be illegal because women are in really difficult circumstances, such as poverty. And at this point, I was recognizing that Kayla was on the same page with me intellectually, but her heart just wasn't yet in unison with her mind. And so I asked Kayla, have you ever seen pictures of abortion before? And she told me, no, I haven't, and asked, how do people usually react to them? And I told her, honestly, some people are really apathetic. They just look at them and are able to move on with their day, while other people, they see these pictures and they are shocked, like they had no idea that's what abortion does. And so Kayla's curiosity was, of course, piqued and asked to see the pictures. So I showed her abortion on the unborn 12 weeks, up to 12 weeks post-fertilization. And as she looked at the pictures, she immediately turns away and says, whoa, that was bad, wasn't it? And she looks back at me, and I'm not saying anything. I'm just letting her sit in her shock. And then she asks, can I see that again? And I'm like, sure. So I show her the pictures, and she's staring at them, eyes wide open, jaw dropped, saying, that's a human being. And at this point, I know that her concern was poverty. So I started sharing with her the amount of resources that are available for women in poverty. I said that there are pregnancy resource centers specifically placed actually in low-income neighborhoods to address the lack of resources that these women might find themselves experiencing. And if they don't have the resources themselves, they'll refer them to someone who does. And Kayla looked at me, closed the brochure, looked back at our poll table question, should abortion remain legal? Picked up the pen and writes, no. And as her reason, and I quote, she said, it's murder. And just when I thought the conversation couldn't get any better, she actually asked me if she could keep my brochure because she wants to talk about abortion now with her friends. So the reason why I share this is because I truly believe that that this issue is not nearly as polarized as it's made out to be. I do think that there, of course, is polarization regarding this issue, but I think that if we approach the conversation in a particular manner that is from a place of humility and genuinely wanting to understand someone, we can make serious strides and help people change their own minds on this issue. So that's where what we're going for today. So I guess I do want to say that what I'll be sharing today are the most common tools that I use on campus that help my conversations. This is not like a full course or anything. There's so much more that you can learn. If you want to talk about or learn about topics like bodily autonomy or go more in depth on these topics, Justice for All actually has free training courses, online Zoom courses. So they're interactive and live. It's called Love 3. And you can sign up for that and you can go more in depth. But for now, I'm just going to be sharing the best tools that I've been taught in hopes that you guys will be able to take them into your own conversations. So the first thing that I think is necessary for conversations is really asking ourselves, how does Christ approach people in conversation? And if we look at the Gospels, there's a wide variety of ways that he reaches people. But I think a common theme of spreading his message of hope, truth, and love was he asked people a lot of questions, and he shared stories and parables. And in that, he was able to reach people where they were at and challenge them in their views. And so Justice for All categorizes this biblical model of evangelization into what we call the 3 essential skills, which is number 1, listening to understand. You want to actually hear where someone's coming from, as opposed to listening to refute. Oftentimes, I think in our conversations, we can we can close our mouths for just enough time to wait for the other person to close their mouth so we can just shut down what they just said. And that's not the goal. We want to actually try to hear where they're coming from and understand what their concerns are. We want to ask questions with an open heart. And the purpose of this is so we can understand their view better, because we never want to assume what someone believes. And sometimes it also helps them understand their own view better, because this might be the first time they're actually thinking critically about why they believe what they believe, and trying to give reasons for what they believe. And the third essential skill is finding common ground when possible. And this is probably the most difficult. I know for myself, it was difficult. And sometimes I look back on, I reflect on conversations and I think, wow, like I could have agreed with this or this. But essentially, we want to find particular points of what they say, and point them out and use them as common ground to show that, again, we're not against each other, we're with each other seeking truth. And so ultimately, this is trying to validate their concern without compromising our belief. So I'm actually going to give an example of finding common ground, and then Caitlin, I'm going to see if you can pull out some common ground with the next a couple examples. And Caitlin has no idea. She has not gone through this training at all. So this is going to be her experiencing learning how to do common ground. So if someone says, I think abortion should be legal because women are in poverty, I would start out by saying, I agree that poverty is a very difficult situation. I personally never experienced it, and I can't even imagine what it's like to be in that situation. And the reason why I point that out is because whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, we can both agree that poverty is not an ideal situation. We can agree that we don't want kids to grow up in poverty. So we might as well point that out so they see that. Or another one is, I think that the unborn are just clumps of cells. On the surface, it looks like I'm not going to find any common ground with them. But what I might actually say is, I agree with you that, a toddler looks more human than at 6 days after implantation, right? I'm not saying that the unborn aren't human there, but I'm validating that I'm not as emotionally drawn to here at 6 days as I am to this toddler here. And that's just to show that, my view isn't coming from this delusional place of thinking I'm literally looking at a toddler when I see a zygote, but trying to show that my view actually isn't based off of what something looks like, but there's something deeper for why I believe what I believe. So Caitlin, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to pretend to be pro-choice, and I'm going to say, well, I think that abortion should be legal because I don't want kids to grow up, getting abused in the foster care system. So just find something you can agree with.
Yeah, so I would agree that I don't want kids to be abused or mistreated in the foster care system. But, and yeah, I think we should also try to work towards helping to fix those issues. But I think what the main issue of abortion is, it's a human life. And ultimately, if a zygote at 6 weeks is a human, that doesn't make them less valuable than, say, a 2-year-old. So was that good?
Yeah. Okay. I think that your common ground was great. Like, you addressed that you don't want kids growing up in the foster care. You even talked about how, we should want to improve foster care. Nothing that you said was untrue. I want to encourage at this point, these, while you're just trying to find common ground and understand their view, to hold back from challenge questions, which would be challenge. I would consider saying, talking about what are the unborn. That would be more of the challenge part. We will get to that, and that was good. But at this point, just finding common ground with someone, and sitting in that at first, is what we want to do. I'm trying to see. There's another example. What about, I'm pro-choice because I think that I don't think that women should be forced to be single moms if the man left her.
Yeah, so I agree, that women should not, be forced into being a single mom. It's a difficult position to be in, and I think that that fathers should be there for, with with the woman who they got pregnant with, and help to take care of that baby because it's his child as well.
Perfect. That was so good. Yeah. So you can see how you can actually find common ground with people on a topic that you fundamentally disagree with them over. And so before, as I mentioned, with challenge questions, we do want to challenge people's views, but at this beginning portion, we just want to build rapport with them and show them that we actually do have a lot more in common than it first appears. And so before I challenge someone, I want to know three things. It's like labeled by the acronym TLC. I want to know if they're pro-choice, the timing they think abortion should be legal. So do you think abortion should be legal through all 9 months of pregnancy or only up until a certain point? If someone says to me that they're pro-life, I actually want to ask them, do you think abortion should be legal or illegal? Because you would be surprised how many people identify as pro-life, but actually think it should still be legal. So I want to specifically ask them the legality, what they think about that. And then I also want to know the circumstances, C. So what kinds of abortions do they think should be legal? As you noticed in Kayla's story, I asked about sex-selective abortion. I asked about abortion as a method of birth control. And this is to really see if they have a super broad view of abortion, thinking it should be legal for any reason or no reason at all, or if they only think it should be legal in certain circumstances, because that'll be super helpful going forward in the conversation. And so as Caitlin brought up, she mentioned that ultimately it does boil down to, what are the unborn? If the unborn, if the unborn are not human beings like you and me, then of course, if they're like a mass of tissue or a cancer or something, then women should be able to remove some weird form of tissue in them that doesn't belong in them, and that should be legal. But if the unborn are human beings, what we do with them matters. And so it's really important to come to a conclusion of whether they are human or not. And our friend Scott Klusendorf at the Life Training Institute, he gives us a tool that actually helps the pro-choice advocate realize for themselves that we need to answer the question, what are the unborn? And I'm just going to demonstrate it again with a story that I had on campus. And this tool, by the way, it's called Trot Out a Toddler. And it's marked by an acronym of 4 A's: agree, apply, ask why, ah. So I'll just share the story and walk you through it. So I was on campus at Wichita State University, and I was speaking with a student named Will. And we were finding a lot of common ground at the beginning of our conversation. But then Will threw a question at me. He asked me, well, what if a woman's in poverty? Shouldn't she be able to get an abortion? And so I started, of course, my answer, finding common ground with A, agree. I told him, I agree that poverty is a super difficult situation. I don't want kids to grow up in poverty. I personally never experienced poverty. I can't even imagine what it's like to be pregnant in poverty. And so I was just trying to show that I'm on the same page with him there. And then I went to step 2, apply. Now, this is kind of giving someone a mini thought experiment. And so I asked him, I said, well, can I ask you a question? It might sound kind of strange, but I think it'll be helpful for a conversation. And he said, sure. So I said, let's imagine that we have a woman standing here, and she has a 2-year-old toddler named Bailey. Now, mom is in serious financial poverty, and she fears that she's not going to be able to pay bills this month, let alone put food on the table tonight. Can we agree that even if killing Bailey might actually help alleviate her financial burden, that shouldn't be a legal option for her? And Will looked at me and said, well, yeah, of course. And that led me into step 3, ask why. So I asked Will, why can't she kill Bailey? I mean, I'm on the same page with you, but why can't she kill Bailey, even if it might actually help get her out of her difficult situation? And Will responded, well, because Bailey's human. And that led me into step 4, Now this is more of like a light bulb moment. It's not supposed to be an I gotcha moment. It's more of me trying to connect the fact that we need to discuss about whether the unborn are human, but in a way that helps him realize this for himself. So I asked Will, can we agree then that if the unborn are human like Bailey, then we should protect the unborn like we'd protect Bailey? I gave him this if-then statement, hypothetical, that shows that it hinges on whether the unborn are human. And Will said, sure, if, but I don't think the unborn are human, or I don't know when they become human. So this wasn't necessarily an argument to make the case for the pro-life position, but it was just to get him to see that we need to talk about whether the unborn are human or not. Caitlin, do you have any questions on that?
Yeah, so I guess how would you defend the position that the unborn are human and answer the question as to when does life begin? Because this is a very hotly debated topic. And, I've met people on the pro-choice spectrum who believe, different things. I've seen people say it should be legal up to birth. Some people say viability. Some say, first trimester. So when would you say it? How would you argue that life begins at conception?
Yeah. So that's a really good question. And I think that sometimes, when someone says it's not human yet, or no one knows when life begins, they could totally be saying no one knows when biological life begins. But they could also be saying no one knows when a human with value, or a human who should have basic rights, or a person begins, right? So let's just assume that they don't know when the biological human begins. I find it really helpful, first, again, to start out with common ground. I'll say, can we agree that you and I are whole human organisms? Yes. Okay, great. And then I will try to find more common ground by pointing at this picture. This is sperm and an egg. I'll say, can we agree that a sperm and an egg are not whole human organisms like you and me? Yes. Okay. So these are actual functional parts of a whole human organism. And so like a sperm by itself will always be a sperm. An egg by itself will always be an egg. But when they come together at fertilization, they actually cease to exist, and they create a new cell that is genetically distinct from both the male and the female. So we come here and we're, at this point agreeing here. And then I'll actually ask them, I'll bring it back to us, and I'll ask maybe some sort of question, like, let's imagine that you were to wake up in a forest one day, and as you have no idea how you got there, you're looking around, you're realizing that you're completely alone. What are your basic needs that you're going to need in order to survive? There's basically 2 or 3, depending on how you categorize it. So Caitlin, what would you need if you just woke up in a forest and you think, okay, I'm in survival mode? How am I going to live?
I would say I would need water, food, shelter. Yeah, I'd say those would be the 3 basics.
Exactly. Yes. So you're going to need shelter, or a proper environment to survive, and water and food, or adequate nutrition. So once I find common ground there, then I'm going to go back here and say, at this point, all this single cell needs to survive and continue its own development into adulthood is the proper environment and adequate nutrition. So if at this young adult stage, all we need are those 2 things to continue our survival and development, and all they need here is those 2 things, do you think it makes sense then to think that this is a whole human organism if we are a whole human organism here? Pretty much most people I speak with will agree with me on the biology. And so the next question that I bring up then, if they're agreeing on that point, is, well, the next question is, of course, like, when we become humans with basic rights, or should have equal value, and this is like a personhood argument. I don't know if maybe you've heard people say, well, it is human, but it's not a person. And so what I would ask them there again is, like in the story I shared with Kayla, I brought up something that's called the equal rights argument. This was made by J.P. Moreland at Biola University. And basically what I'll tell people I'm on campus with is I'll say, let's just like put the unborn to the side for a moment, because they're the group in question that we're trying to figure out. They're like this unclear case, like we're trying to decide, should they have rights or not? And let's focus on clear cases. Who do we know concretely should have rights? well, I know that you and I should have rights, right? And so that's when I ask someone, I'll point out all of our differences. Like we may be different heights, skin colors, hair colors, eye colors, genders, maybe you're smarter, or maybe I have a disability or you have a disability. We're very different. But in order to demand that we should be treated equally, it seems like there should be something that is actually the same or equal about us. And then I'm going to ask the person, what do you think is the same about us that demands we be treated equally? And the answer that might seem obvious to some people is, well, we're all human, right? But what happens if they give a different answer, like consciousness or rationality or self-awareness? What do we do then? And at this point, this is where we can actually put their view to the test and see what a world would look like if our basic rights were based on who has consciousness or is aware that they exist, and see how it plays out. So let's imagine that we have like this circle around us. So we call this circle the equal rights circle. Everyone who's in it should have basic equal rights, at least in the right to life. Anyone who's outside of it doesn't mean that they should be treated poorly, but they don't have the same kind of rights as anyone in it would have. And if someone says consciousness is what makes us, is what's the same about us that demands we be treated equally, then we're going to want to sort out who would be in the circle and who would be out of it. So I would first agree that, yes, you and I are conscious. Everyone here who's attending this school is conscious. That's how we're able to attend. So I'd say that makes sense of why we'd be in the circle. But I look over in that corner over there and I see a squirrel. That squirrel's conscious too. That means that the squirrel would be in this circle. Now, I'm not saying squirrels should be abused. I think animals have a right to not be abused. But I don't know that it would make sense to say that it would be equally wrong to run over a squirrel by a car as it would be to run over a toddler by a car, for example. I mean, we don't want to run over either, but do you think that it would make sense to say that both should be punished in the same way? Or if you were to intentionally run over a squirrel and intentionally run over a toddler, do you think it's equally wrong? And the person will say, no, okay, I guess that doesn't make sense. So they might say something else. What's another, Caitlin, maybe what's like another thing you may have heard someone say for like a personhood?
Is it yeah, I guess maybe like, like a seed is not a tree or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think saying like a seed is not a tree, this would maybe be a little more, I would think this would maybe be actually a biology argument in saying that the unborn aren't like fully human yet. They're like still need to become human. So let me actually address this and I'll go back to the equal rights. But I think with a seed is not a tree. First, I would say I agree. A seed is not a tree. Because what is a tree? A tree is the adult stage of a plant life. And a seed is the embryonic stage of a plant life. So I agree that a seed is not a tree in the same way that I agree that a toddler is not an adult. And so I want to ask the person, can we agree though that a redwood seed is of the same species as a redwood tree? And if that's the case, then it would make sense that a human embryo is of the same species as an adult human. They're just at different stages of development. Does that make sense? Did I explain that clear?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think potentially another thing someone could say is, well, what we all share in common that demands we treat equally is the fact that we are rational. And so let's put this view to the test. Caitlin, do you know, are you and I rational?
Yes.
Yes, we have the capacity to reflect on reasons and logic and all that. Yes, okay. Or we can do that right now. Can a squirrel reflect on reasons and logic?
Um, Probably not in the same capacity as us.
Yeah, I would say that a squirrel can't. So if rationality is what demands that we be treated equally, you and I would be in the circle. Squirrels would be out. Probably, I think actually all non-human animals would be out. So I think that makes sense of a lot of our rights. There's a little problem. Infants aren't rational. So if it's rationality that demands we be treated equally, then I'm not saying that infants would have no value necessarily, but it wouldn't be the same kind of wrong or crime to kill an infant as it would be to kill a 10-year-old, for example. And I don't think that makes sense of our world that we live in. So at this point, I might actually ask someone if I could share my answer for that question. And I would say, I think it's that we're human. And I'd say that this is the only answer I've seen that includes all born humans, that doesn't, allow infanticide, while also excluding all non-human animals like squirrels. But of course, as a result of that, the unborn share humanness, so they would be in the equal rights circle. But I also think that humanness makes sense of why things like racism and sexism are wrong. I don't think racism is wrong because we're rational. I think it's because Black people, white people, any other group of people are human. I think it's wrong. Sexism is wrong, not because women are rational, but because men and women are both human.
Mhm.
And so that is kind of how I would navigate around personhood. So do you have any questions on that?
Um, Not that I can think of.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and I honestly find that this argument, in my experience, has been the most helpful argument out of going through the biology, trotting out a toddler, or anything, because it really challenges people to consider why they believe their beliefs that they've held their whole life. I mean, you just assume that racism is wrong growing up because your parents told you, but a lot of people, including myself before I heard this, never considered, well, why? And so this actually helps people critically think through that. And then they're able to apply it to the unborn, of course.
Yeah, that's like a really great example.
Yeah. Now, just like Kayla, who agreed with me at this point, okay, yes, I agreed that it's the fact that we're human, and I would follow through that the unborn are also human, so therefore they should have rights. She was still really struggling with poverty. And there are a couple different ways that you could speak with someone about that, but I really would want to emphasize in just actually sitting with them in whatever their concern is, and actually listening to them. See, like, I would ask questions like, have you personally, ever experienced poverty, or do you know someone who has? And try to just understand their story, because every single person that you speak with has a story, and their past absolutely impacts how they view the topic of abortion, what they think about the unborn. And so knowing that information is super helpful going forward, so you can actually meet them where they're at. And in Kayla's case, what it ended up taking for her to actually shift her view, and not just shift her view, but actually want to become a pro-life advocate right after that, was showing her images of abortion. And I like to ask people permission personally if they're interested in seeing pictures. Most people have said yes. It's been like maybe 1 or 2 people who have ever said no to me. But if you ask it in an open-ended way where they have the choice to say yes or no, people are really receptive, and images are super powerful. I would never want to yeah, I don't think that we should neglect images if we believe that it's an appropriate time to actually show someone an image to see what they're advocating. Um, so the next issue that sometimes comes up is someone who's asking about rape. What about abortion in the case of rape? And I think, a common pro-life response, and this is one that I've definitely participated in the past before Justice for All too, is saying, well, that's only 1% of abortions. You're just appealing to emotion. The exception doesn't justify the rule. And all these things are true. There's nothing incorrect about these statements. But I want you to ask yourself, how could they be perceived by a pro-choice person? So Caitlin, if you were pro-choice and you just asked me, what about abortion in the case of rape? And I just told you, well, that's only 1% of abortions. How would that come across to you?
I mean, I think that if I was pro-choice, that would come across as somewhat offensive, honestly, because rape is obviously a very sensitive issue. And I mean, there's no justification for it. It's always wrong. So it seems almost incentive to ignore, even if it is a small percentage, to ignore that small percentage of people who it does happen to and who it does, scar, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said there, like, even if it's 1%, like those are individual, what is it? If it's roughly 850 or so thousand abortions in the US every year, and that's 1%, I don't know the exact math that would be, but somewhere between 8 and 10,000 women who are raped, who are getting abortions, that's a significant number. And so when someone brings up the question of rape, I never want to downplay the reality and horror of rape. And so I think, as Caitlin was saying, to a woman who's asking this question, it might sound like you're saying that someone who's raped, well, their trauma doesn't matter, or rape doesn't matter. It's insignificant. And as pro-life advocates, do we think rape matters?
I mean, of course, yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
a horrible thing to happen to literally anyone. So
Exactly. And we probably think that rape matters for the same reasons that we think abortion is wrong, because it's harming a human being. It's violating a human being in their body, right? And so when someone brings up rape, I actually think it's an amazing opportunity to really meet them where they're at and show that you, as a pro-life individual, agree that rape is awful. You agree that you think that men should be held accountable for rape. You think that that they should be punished, and if someone were to share with you that they were raped, how would you normally respond to them? You'd probably say something like, "I'm so sorry. Are
yeah,
you okay?"
yeah, I'd be like, obviously I'd just be like, oh wow, that's so horrible. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that when we're talking about abortion, we shouldn't neglect that. We shouldn't remove that from the conversation. We should actually respond in the same way that we respond to the concept or topic of rape if abortion wasn't in the conversation. And that's really just talking about the gravity of rape. Sometimes I even ask someone, do you happen to know someone who has been raped, if they ask this question about rape to me? And I'm not entitled to their answer, but it is helpful if they do decide to share their answer with me. And a lot of the times people do have stories, whether it's their sister, their mom, their friend, or maybe themselves. And so before I even get into the intellectual side of the argument, should abortion remain legal in the case of rape, I want to understand where they're coming from and hear them out, so they know that I really do care about them as a person or their friend who was raped. And so if they're sharing a story with me, I'm going to listen. I'm not going to try to jump into arguments at all. In fact, I'm going to sit in this relational step of just meeting them where they're at until they drag me out of it by asking, so I see that you think that rape's bad, but do you think that it should be abortion should be legal then in the case of rape, it's not until they bring it up again that I'm actually going to address their question. And my colleague, Rebecca Hodavi, someone actually did share a story of how they knew someone who was raped, a close friend of theirs. And that's exactly what Rebecca did. She sat in the relational, really learning about their story and how this has impacted their friend and the person who was raped. And it wasn't until he asked her, so do you think that abortion should be legal in the case of rape then? That she actually addressed and gave an intellectual answer. And it went something like this. She let him know that her answer might not be easy for him to hear. So she just told that to him from the start. And then once he still said, it's okay, like I just want to know what you think, she essentially trotted out a toddler, as we talked about earlier, and said, and made her own variation, said, like, let's imagine that we have two women standing here who both were raped and got pregnant from that rape. Now, this woman over here, she has already given birth to her child, and she's holding in her arms her 2-month-old infant. This woman over here is currently 2 months pregnant with that child. And she asked the student, can both women kill their child because of the rape? And the student said, no. And what this pointed out was that the issue was not about circumstance, because both women were raped and conceived a child in rape. But yet he still didn't think that the woman who had the 2-month-old born child should be allowed to kill her infant because of the rape. And so she was able to, because, well, she had already talked about, the biology, the personhood, and all this earlier in the conversation. So he got it immediately. He's like, okay, I get it. It's because, the child's human. But he was still really struggling to concede that abortion should be illegal in that case. And that's when Rebecca was just saying, it sounds like maybe you understand what I'm saying, but your heart just isn't ready. It's not ready to go there yet. And I think this is a common thing for a lot of people. It's like your heart isn't ready to go there yet, because you think about what that means for someone who has had an abortion after they were raped, or what that means to you if you think about if you ever were raped and got pregnant. And so at some point, some people, especially with this topic, they may agree and understand what you believe, but they need time to process. And that processing time isn't necessarily going to resolve itself in front of you. And so I think it's important to remember what our goal is. Our goal is not to see people, necessarily change their minds right in front of us. It's great when they do. But our goal is to challenge people to the pro-life view so they can change their minds in their own timing when God, after God has worked with them and helped them through it. And maybe something to consider is, if someone presented to you really good arguments and evidence to believe that the unborn are not biologically human, and that abortion is moral and should be legal, do you think that you would change your mind on the spot right in front of them?
I mean, I feel like I probably would be really reluctant to, like, if this is a view that I'm holding, and, I'm faced with something that challenges my beliefs, like, it's going to take time to, like, figure out, like, wait, do I agree with my position, or is she actually right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a perfectly normal response, because if you've believed something your whole life, someone challenging that, you're going to want to actually fact check it. You're going to want to go home and see if you can find better arguments to respond to those with. So seeing someone change their mind, I don't see that as necessarily I don't see it as proof of a successful conversation. because people, you have no idea what their minds go through when they go home and reflect on the conversation you had with them. And so I just want to encourage anyone who's having conversations to be less focused on seeing someone say I'm pro-life now, and more focused on trying to help someone have tools and a thought process that can lead them, that can that can lead them to have to really chew on what you said and think about it, and then in their own time, in God's timing, he will work with them to change their minds. And I think that especially is the case when we're talking about rape as well. People may agree and understand, but they just need time.
Mhm.
So do you have any questions about any of that?
No, I think you did a really good job of explaining that issue. Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm glad that that was all clear. Let's see here. The next thing that I think would be helpful to talk about is actually how to put these tools into practice. In general, we can use these tools to talk with our friends, our family about abortion, and you can have productive conversations. But not everyone, has friends who are willing or who are pro-choice to talk with, or maybe you don't have access to going on college campuses and having, these big displays to start dialogue. But I think a great resource that anyone can use to have conversations is social media. And so I want to just share some social media etiquette to help people have productive conversations, because I truly believe that despite how polarized websites like Twitter look like, there is so much opportunity to actually have good conversations with people. And the reason why I believe that is because I've used these Justice for All tools on social media and had good conversations. So I just want to share some tips that I've figured along the way as I was trying to understand the realm of social media dialogue. So I'm going to be mentioning Twitter a lot because that's personally that was my favorite site for conversations. But I think Facebook and Instagram are also really good for conversations. The reason why I personally like Twitter is because there is a search bar where you can search things up, like the phrases personally pro-life, but. And the reason why I love searching this phrase is because you're going to see an entire realm of people who all are saying, I'm personally pro-life, but, maybe politically pro-choice, or I think in this circumstance, it should be legal. And those particular people are so receptive to wanting to have conversations about abortion. And there's also a lot of common ground that you can find with them off the bat. You already agree probably that abortion is bad. You want to reduce abortions. Maybe you don't think it should be legal through all 9 months of pregnancy. Both of you can find common ground on that. And they have some sort of intuition that there's something wrong with abortion. That's why they're personally pro-life, right? So great people to talk to, because what I normally see on social media is really these fiery brawls between people who think that abortion should be legal through all 9 months of pregnancy for any reason or no reason at all. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't reach those people. I absolutely think that, God can work in everyone. But I think that we will reach a lot more people if we are intentionally going out of our way to find people who are maybe unsure about the issue, or they're more moderate on the issue. So searching on Twitter, personally pro-life, but great place to start. I would say Facebook has an advantage of allowing you to write longer messages, so you can really share more complex ideas and spend more time in the relational challenge with them, rather than being limited to 160 characters or something. And then I really like Instagram because I think Instagram has a great DM platform. And I'll talk more about direct messaging in a moment. But Instagram is just super easy to message someone, whether they follow you or not, or whether you follow them or not. You can just send them a message there. But before you even get into an actual conversation, I just want to say the 3 essential skills: listening to understand, finding common ground when possible, asking questions with an open heart. These need to be used, but on steroids, because, well, let me just ask you, have you ever read into someone's text message and you didn't know if they were mad at you before?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we're on social media and we're speaking with someone who doesn't agree with us, and they have no idea who we are, they're probably going to assume that we're coming in with an aggressive tone, and they have no idea if we're mad at them or not. So what is the way to compensate for that? You can use exclamation marks and emojis, lots of them. So I find that that's really helpful, so people know that you're coming in good faith rather than trying to attack them. Something that I found was super helpful and instrumental in my conversations is actually liking their comments when they say something that I can't agree with. So if someone just says, I think that women who are in poverty are really struggling and they need help, I will like that comment because I agree with everything in that statement. If I have an opportunity, I will like it. If we are talking about biology and then they say, okay, yeah, I agree with you then that the unborn are biologically human, I will like that comment. I want to show them that I'm not against them. I am trying to be their friend and talk with them, again, guiding towards truth. Another thing is, I think especially on social media, we need to really check ourselves and humble ourselves and, admit when we don't know something, or if we were wrong, because honesty builds trust. People aren't going to trust you if you're trying to make up reasons for some statement that you actually don't have facts to or evidence to back up. But if you say, actually, I haven't heard of that before, or I need to check on that, can you send me a link so I can learn more about it? People are more likely to see you as someone that they can trust, and having a good conversation. I would also say on Twitter specifically, I like to break up my responses. So if I will start my first tweet response and dedicate it to common ground alone, and just saying all the things that I agree with and all the statements, the heart behind their worries, their concerns that I can agree with as well. And I'll reserve that for one tweet. And then under that tweet, the next one on the thread, that's where I will respond with a challenge of some sort. And I like to do that. So it also gives them an opportunity to like something that I agree with. I've actually had conversations where I start liking their tweets, and then as a result of that, they start following, and then it's really cool because we're now having a really chill conversation. But that's why I like to break it up, and it just is easier to navigate. And the next thing, I would highly advise against quote tweeting pro-choice responses. And the reason for this is, I want you to ask yourself, are you quote tweeting the reply because you want your pro-life followers to dogpile on and ratio their reply? Or is there an actual benefit to quote tweeting, that providing a normal, thread response or DM wouldn't be able to give? And because we don't want our conversations to turn into this dog pile of everyone ganging up on someone, right? That's not how you have productive conversations. If like 10 pro-choice people were all ganging up on you, no longer are you in respectful dialogue mode, you're in defense mode. So we don't want that. So I would highly advise against quote tweeting people, and just responding in their thread or just taking it to the DMs. And the reason why I keep on bringing up the DMs is because it's one-on-one. So there's no risk of outside people getting involved or interjecting your conversation that you're trying to make civil. It helps reduce the temptation to give witty replies, so that way your followers can like and laugh at the pro-choice person. You don't want that. You don't want them to feel like they're being attacked. And also, you might get someone who wouldn't have publicly stated that they either grew up in poverty or maybe they were raped, but they will tell it to you privately. And that information is really helpful in conversations, because you can understand where they're coming from and why they might be hung up on a certain point, if they just aren't willing to agree that the unborn, for example, are biologically human, or it's the fact that we're human that demands that we be treated equally or something of that sort. So those are what I have learned so far. I'm sure there's plenty more to improve on always on social media conversations. But that's what's helped me so far. So do you have any questions?
Yeah, no, that was really great. And I think, yeah, like everything you said was just like really important. And like some of these things, like I haven't even thought about, like, before, like the DMing part. But yeah, it's just like it's so important when, like, even when you're disagreeing with somebody and like trying to defend the truth, like making sure to speak the truth in love and in charity. And yeah, I think like these are some really great tips on how to do that, because if you speak the truth with love, like people are going to have a lot of an easier time receiving it, rather than if you're just being confrontational or trying to prove yourself right and prove them wrong. And so, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the posture of the conversation, of your heart in the conversation, that really shifts the dynamic.
Yeah. And
Uh,
ultimately, we should try to think like, is like our goal ultimately is to save like, human lives. So like by changing people's minds and hearts, like that'll help them. And so trying to, I guess, accept like a little bit of humility to think like, is this comment going to actually help achieve that goal? Or is it just to inflate your ego?
Absolutely. Asterisk, exclamation point, exclamation point. Yeah. Um, so I think, I guess I just want to encourage anyone who happens to be stumbling upon this video and maybe you're wanting to get into conversations, but you don't know how. Um, Start with I mean, I would say honestly, the easiest place to have conversations is really starting on social media, because it's like there's no risk. You're not going to lose a friend if you're talking with some random stranger in live actions comment section. It's like it's a great way to test out these tools and see how they work in real life. But if you just want to jump right into in-person conversations, which I also would highly recommend, you can just ask your close friends, like, I don't know if we've ever talked about abortion before. What do you think about, this whole case that's coming up this year that might be challenging Roe v. Wade? And hear what they think about abortion there. And then you can ask them, okay, do you think that abortion should be legal through all 9 months of pregnancy? That question is super helpful to get you into a conversation about abortion without it seeming really antagonizing. So that's what I would encourage you to do.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on here, and make sure to follow the Instagram. It's right above Christina's shoulders.
Yes.
And yeah, and the YouTube, and yeah, check out the link below. What is it? It's
Yeah, Justice for All. Yeah, Justice for All,
it's just
jfaweb.org is our
okay.
website. And if you wanted to sign up for our online training course, which is where we actually go more in depth and actually give you interactive practice and role play, pro-life and pro-choice, that would be jfaweb.org/love, LOVE, and then the number 3.
Okay, cool. Yes. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and bye.
Bye.